You are watching Nimasa This Week, the authorized voice for the Nigerian maritime sector. My name is Iretiola Doyle and you're welcome. And once more, on behalf of everyone here at Nimasa This Week, we're wishing you a happy new year and sincerely hope that your year is off to a great start. Now, the rules of engagement is a term commonly used when the discourse revolves around war. But in the ever-expanding world of business, that term is gradually gaining new meaning. Our preview this week recalls key moments in global maritime business and ends up looking at Nimasa and the challenges of enforcing the rules of engagement in our maritime sector.
Over 90% of the goods and services consumed globally are distributed through the seas. Global shipping, therefore, has helped governments all over the world to show that the responsibility of meeting up with the socio-economic obligations owed their people at all times and in all situations. Being able to accomplish this feat has not come without a reasonable dose of incidents, accidents, designs and machinations, sometimes engineered to serve the wanton needs of a powerful few to the detriment of the general good. There you have the inauspicious beginnings of brigandage on global waters, otherwise known as piracy, and which today has a variant closer to the shores carrying the tag of sea robbery. Transport across the waters has a well-documented history spanning several millennia. The history in question can only be judged complete when adequate recognition is given to the traditional maritime power bases, including countries like Spain, Portugal, United Kingdom, United States, Greece and Italy, just to mention a few. The recognition, it must be noted, has to be accorded even in the full knowledge that the origin of piracy and sea robbery can as well be traced to those traditional maritime powers. With virtually all the countries on earth getting involved in maritime trade, the economic space in it progressively whittled down, inviting in the process the tendency towards cutthroat competition and conflict. The signal was up for some sort of regulation and later mitigation, following a number of high-profile disputes among seagoing countries. In the course of history, laws or regulations governing the conduct of trade on the oceans have undergone multiple transformations, changes that most times had sought to protect the interests of individual countries. Admiralty or global maritime laws had in addition gone some way in arresting the territorial ambitions of a select group of corporate interests who constituted the single biggest threat to world peace at the time. While profit-taking remains the order of the day on global waters, the argument has to be advanced that normalcy and cordiality have largely defined relationships in the global maritime industry, at least in contemporary times. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, the United Nations organ responsible for administering the global maritime industry, has been instrumental towards sustaining and deepening the intrinsic value of these relationships. This it has been doing through the adoption of certain conventions and its continuous encouragement of member countries to domesticate same for the administration of maritime issues at the local level. In Nigeria, the government, through the instrumentality of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Nimasa, has domesticated quite a good number of these conventions. The agency has been involved in concerted efforts to ensuring that these domesticated statutes are imbibed and implemented by local industry players. However, there have been challenges facing the Admiralty jurisdiction in Nigeria. Fortunately, Nimasa is also doing something very urgently about this. By the letters of its establishing legal instrument, Nimasa is a corporate organization that can sue other bodies or individuals and can also be taken to court for any perceived constitutional infringement. The central thrust of its mandate, namely the regulation of the maritime sector, brings it into regular contact with a whole range of such corporate groups and influential individuals or interests. The varied interests represented by these parties constitute an intricate and consistent pattern of demands which the agency is expected to satisfy if it must continue to be seen as being socially and economically responsible. Nimasa on its own is constitutionally mandated to make marginal fiscal demands on all maritime industry players with a view to investing the collected monies on the development of the entire sector. In all of these, time and circumstance have proved that it's easier said than done when it comes to the management of financial relations, especially in the Nigerian maritime sector, where at the moment survival occupies the uppermost echelons of the minds of businessmen. Take into consideration the fact that profit being the soul of business, and you end up with a complicated economic dynamic of immense proportions.
Our judiciary constitutes 1/3 of the democratic tripod which upholds the country's body politic. It is the arm of government that provides a platform for complaint and resolution. Now, in recognition of the importance of this and in pursuit of its capacity-building objectives, Nimasa recently held a 2-day strategic admiralty law seminar for judges in Lagos. Our field correspondent Charles Ohauku's report on that is up next.
In Nigeria, members of the bench or body of judges have the critical task of interpreting the constitution with a view to eliminating grey areas which, if left unattended to, can become impediment to national progress. Essentially, laws governing the conduct of business at sea fall within the purview of this assignment, and for obvious reasons, Nimasa remains the primary legal reference point on all matters of business on Nigerian waters. Fully aware of this important demand, Nimasa has at several times taken the lead in preparing Nigerian judges for proper appreciation of the peculiarities of the country's maritime environment. As part of its broader capacity enhancement profile, the Maritime Agency recently organized a strategic admiralty law seminar for judges, the fourth in the series in Lagos, southwest of Nigeria. The 2-day seminar was marked by speeches and presentation of position papers by a distinguished list of legal authorities in Nigeria, led by the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, Justice Ibrahim Auta, OFR. Participants included Senior Advocate of Nigeria Mike Ibokwe, whose paper dwelt on recent development in Nigerian maritime litigation, Dr. Omogbai Omoebo, who spoke on legal framework for maritime security management implications and impact, and maritime lawyer Emeka Akabogo, whose address looked at legal issues in marine environmental management in Nigeria.
There's an international regime of marine environmental management, which is a legal regime under the International Maritime Organization. And that legal regime is incorporated under the broad body of admiralty law. So it is environmental management is incorporated into admiralty law in addition to many other components. This seminar holding now is a routine seminar because for the purpose of development of capacity of the judges, because the nature of maritime law practice is such that you are dealing with international conventions, international transactions, and you're dealing with disputes of an international dimension in a very technical area. Nobody ever teaches or learns maritime law rudimentarily in university, essentially. So the judges are being given the enablement to adjudicate on many of these disputes more efficiently and more timeously. So that's the essence of this program.
Professor Bankole Shodikbo's paper explained the rights of action and regimes of carriage for cargo claims in Nigeria.
The problem is that bill of lading is what we call a contract of adhesion. That is, the parties are not equal. When you want to ship your goods, you don't negotiate the terms. They just ask you to pay, and that is it. So you sign off, and when you sign off, you don't know that the clauses are there. You cannot say, I want to remove this particular clause from the bill of lading. And so there's that argument that it is possible that for that reason, the court should not enforce foreign jurisdiction clauses.
Mrs. Omolola Ikwagu took the audience through the practice and procedure of ship registration and mortgage in Nigeria.
To qualify for registration as a Nigerian ship, first of all, the ship must be wholly owned by Nigerian citizens. And if it is owned by non-individuals, that's by bodies, corporates, and partnerships, it must be established under and subject to Nigerian laws, having their principal place of business in Nigeria. Before the ship actually proceeds for registration, the ship must have a name. The ship must have a name. You can do the ship MV Endurance, you can do MV Blessing. And once all the requirements have been laid down in the Act have been satisfied, the registrar is obliged to issue a certificate of registration. And the incidents of the ship mortgage are very clear to us all. The borrower, of course, is the mortgagor. The lender, the bank, is the mortgagee. The mortgagor transfers the legal title of the vessel to the mortgagee, subject, of course, to cessor of redemption. He does not, however, transfer possession. That when the borrower takes money from the bank and issues a mortgage, transferring legal title from the vessel to the bank, he retains possession of the vessel because, of course, he has to operate, he has to keep the vessel operational, so as to build even funds and resources to pay back the mortgage.
On his own part, Enam Wilson dwelled on Nigerian-owned vessels under the cabotage regime, legal implications of bareboat registration.
When the Nigerian content issue became heated up and cabotage enforcement was revved up, a lot of the foreign companies were going about looking for Nigerians that will represent their interests. The whole idea is appoint Mr. Enam Wilson as the director of XY company, register the vessel in the name of XY company, or grant a bareboat charter to XY company. That way, on the face of the documentation that is presented to both Nimasa, the ship registry, and the cabotage registry, the bareboat charterer is Nigeria. But believe that there are layers and layers of documents which are not filed or required to be filed. The relationships, for the ones that I've seen, they are going very well because the marriage is still in its early stages. There are lots of foreigners in bed with Nigerians, creating arrangements that will enable them to do this. As with all contractual relationships, over time, disputes starts to arise, especially when the money in the pot becomes a lot. The tendency, I don't say this out of disrespect for Nigerians, is for the Nigerian to say, without me you can't do this, and you can't take me out of this. So I am in charge and I'm in control, and they want to take over. What rights are available to the mortgagee under Nigerian law? You will say they are foreigners, so none of our business. Well, we are in an international community, and we try to make sure that our laws is consistent with best practices.
In reality, it was a judge's affair, and the wise men of the bench appeared completely fired up and ready to test their years of experience adjudicating on maritime issues against the emerging realities of a sector in transition. Flanked by retired Justice Emmanuel Sanyolu and Senior Advocate of Nigeria Chidi Ilogo, Chief Judge of the Federal High Court Justice Ibrahim Auta OFR led the discussions. The learned judge condemned outright the practice of obtaining injunctions from foreign courts in order to arrest judicial pronouncement in Nigeria.
Bringing an ex parte order made in US, bringing it to Nigerian courts to enforce. It's a Nigerian law, it's an ex parte order obtained abroad. And he wants the Nigerian court to register it. The ex parte order. It's before, of course, I will not mention it, but you can see how ridiculous we go into this type of thing. An ex parte order obtained abroad, you want to be registered in Nigeria so that you can enforce the ex parte order. If you do that and take it to America, they will laugh at the lawyer and say he doesn't know what to do. But I think this matter that we should seriously take up, I am going to be the attorney. to see that they react to it. And even in the US State Department report, they should do something about it.
The Chief Judge's position received timely support from the audience.
There should be a reaction by the federal government on it, and then the bench and the bar are supposed to have a summit on that and decide on what to do with judgments from the US. If it was a Nigerian court that took that decision, it would have been a confederation all over the world that we are archaic and all kinds of things.
The Chief Judge of the Federal High Court also called for a stop to the habit of painting the country in bad colors by lawyers or journalists operating in the diaspora.
Because you find that, well, that's the problem with our lawyers. They can say anything to demean their country. Judgment was obtained from one of the courts in Nigeria, I don't know whether it's Federal High Court, and they want to enforce it in US. And the only argument of the council there is that courts in Nigeria are not free.
Independent.
They are not independent. You know, you mentioning about equipment, is that a ground? Because I saw it yesterday, they were saying if that's the case, every judgment from US also were not going to enforce it. So I think the council in that matter is not attacking the substance of the case. He's saying that judges in Nigeria are not free. Judges in Nigeria are very, very free.
In the same vein, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Chidi Ilogo, attempted to clear the air regarding what he termed the misapplication of one of the establishing legal instruments of Nimasa, the Merchant Shipping Act.
If you recall, indeed, some of us have argued that it was a misnomer in the first place to have that provision in that act, because Merchant Shipping Act does not deal with cargo, and technically it should never have been put in the 2004 Act. When it was removed, no similar provision was introduced anywhere as yet, and that is partly why there's a move by Nimasa to introduce a bill of lading act for Nigeria. The concern I have is that the 1855 Act has been repealed in the UK. We should expedite action to regularize the position in Nigeria. I am of the view that the argument to allow notified party to sue with due respect remains irregular.
Answering questions arising from his presentation, Professor Shodiko outlined a number of trends in Nigeria's judicial administration that militate against the issue of jurisdiction, which according to him should be sacrosanct in the dispensation of justice in Nigeria.
The jurisdiction that the CJ of the Federal High Court has been able to take by statute, they are taking it back by interpretation of statute. And that is a very, very big problem, which I don't know the solution, because it appears that village courts are very, very eager to take back the jurisdiction that statutes. Yes. So if we change the law tomorrow, they will still interpret it in such a way as if they are taking it back. And you know, it's like ancestral.
Members of the audience raised important questions in respect of the registration and mortgaging of Nigerian-owned vessels.
The practice is that when you want to take a mortgage, you want to give a mortgage on the new build, what the lawyers usually do is to register the mortgagee as a co-owner, as a co-owner with the mortgagor.
The MSA 2007 specifically says that a mortgagor is not an owner. So I don't know how you will reconcile that with the practice that you carry out.
And there's no way they can hold onto the mortgage since the mortgage is not yet in the vessel is not yet in our register.
It was the quintessential intellectual exercise A lively exchange provoked by clearly identified needs for urgent improvement in the structural well-being of Nigeria's judiciary. After the seminar, Assistant Director, Legal Services and Acting Legal Advisor of Nimasa, Mrs. Rita Urakwa, among other things, outlined the fundamental reasons behind the convocation of the seminar.
Basically, the essence of this exercise seminar is actually to sensitize the judges as to all our statutes and then the emerging trends in the maritime industry. That is why we had a variety of speakers who are industry stakeholders, learned associates, learned senior advocates of Nigeria, who spoke to them on various range of subjects. So the idea is like bring them up to date with the emerging trends and also hear from them also the challenges or where we can improve on our mandates. Whenever this Cabotage Act is going to be reviewed, whatever feedbacks we get from here is going to play a major role in whatever decisions that we take in reviewing the Cabotage Act eventually.
A session which majorly focused on possible ways and means of boosting the participation of Nigerian businesses in the maritime sector could have done with some soul-searching and candor as provided by one of the resource persons.
We have to look at how the agency operates and empower the agency to implement the law. If we implement the laws that we have now, cabotage will start working, I assure you. And once you implement it, if there are issues, you can now address those issues by amendment of the law.
Some of the participants shared their experience.
We are dealing with Admiralty matters in Federal High Court, and this seminar is basically on Admiralty, and it's only the Federal High Court that has jurisdiction to entertain the issues discussed here. Yeah, so it's going to be of immense importance to judges of the Federal High Court.
Up next is our Maritime Cargo Report, which is simply a breakdown of cargo in ships expected to berth in ports within the Lagos Palisades District this week. As always, the Maritime Cargo Report is brought to you courtesy of the Shipping Development Department of Nimasa. There are 10 motor vessels awaiting berth at the Lagos Palisades District this week. A breakdown of their consignment shows that 5 out of this number are laden with rice. There are 2 conveying used vehicles, while 1 each have on board bulk wheat, bulk sugar, and fertilizer. 6 out of the 14 motor tanker vessels awaiting berth at the Lagos Palisades District this week have on board premium motor spirit or petrol. There are 2 vessels each conveying Jet A1 or aviation fuel, DPK or kerosene, and automotive gas oil, AGO or diesel. The remaining 2 motor tanker vessels are laden with base oil and ethanol. And now we come to our favorite part of the show, where we get to interact with our numerous viewers out there. And this week we're starting with this question, which is from Michael Ejila, who wrote in from Ogbomoso in Oyo State. And he says, when is the next phase of the Nigerian Seafarers Development Program screening for candidates wishing to take up maritime studies abroad? And the answer to your question, Michael, is that the next phase of the screening under the NSDP will be adequately advertised on this program, as well as selected national dailies. You may also keep in touch with the Public Relations Unit of Nimasa for further inquiries and information. Our final question on the segment this week comes from Samaila Sani, who wrote in from Lokoja in Kogi State. And he wants to know how he can obtain information on the number of cabotage compliant vessels in Nigeria. Now, Samaila Sani, thank you so much for that question. Nimasa says there is a full-fledged cabotage services department in the agency. The responsibility of this department is to manage the data of cabotage compliant vessels. However, please contact officers of the Public Relations Unit of the agency for more information. Now, don't forget, this is an interactive show. Be they questions or comments, all you need to do is to send them to the email address currently showing on your screen. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. As always, we hope that we kept you informed and educated. Now, please don't forget, this is an interactive show. We want to hear what you have to say. Just send your emails or comments to the email address showing on your screen. I'm going to be here, same time, same station next week. Till I see you, I'm wishing you smooth sailing and bon voyage.